So, Marco Respinti, thank you for joining me on this interview.
Thank you, Christine.
So, I want to talk today about Bitter Winter, which is the organization that you help run, and talk a little bit about religious freedom in China and what are the issues surrounding it, especially during this day and time. Can you tell us a little bit of background for the organization? What is Bitter Winter, and how did you become involved with it?
Yes, of course. Well, Bitter Winter is basically a journal. It's a magazine, an online magazine, which we publish every day. So it's a daily magazine in 5 languages: Chinese, English, Korean, um, Italian, and Spanish. We're pretty proud of being able to publish also in Chinese. Since we focus only on human rights and religious liberty in China. So publishing in Chinese, it's a big feature for us. And of course, the Chinese government knows that. We have been a few times quoted in confidential CCP documents as kind of dangerous. I mean, dangerous people because we're speaking the truth. We are reporting on what is really happening in the country, and this is we think the effect of being able to publish in so many languages, among which Chinese and English, which is of course read all over the world. As I told you. Bitter Winter is a magazine, so we deal with news reports. We have been able and we are able to publish many unpublished videos which are online for the first time. We are pretty proud to have been able, after a few weeks after our launch, to have been able to publish the very first video from inside one of the ill-famed, let's call them by their name, concentration camps in Xinjiang. You can see many pictures from the outside of these facilities, but we were the first ones being able to document from this facility from the inside. Keep in mind that, as you know, the CCP, the Chinese government, are saying that these facilities are not prisons. They are not concentration camps. They are, professional schools or something like that. We were able to show these professional schools from the inside, and you can see barbed wires. You can see all the technical equipment of the prison. So I mean those are prisons, and we're again pretty proud to have been able to document that. To go back to Bitter Winter as such, we went online on May the 2nd of 2 years ago, in 2018. So we are a little bit more than 2 years old. Bitter Winter was born out of an original combination between religious studies experts, activists and advocates for human rights, and journalists, professional journalists as myself. I joined in since the beginning as the director in charge, being a professional journalist. The full structure needed a professional skill like that, and I was very happy to join in because human rights and religious freedom has been always at the center of my interest and concerns. I published a book on human rights in China more than 10 years ago, and as a journalist, I dealt with many other topics. But when the possibility to deal again with China, human rights and religious freedom, I say yes right away, because it's a very challenging, important, and relevant topic, not only for Chinese people but also for foreigners. I'm an Italian. I live in Milan. But nonetheless, I think that the situation in China should concern everyone. Keeping together this different people within one magazine. It's an original thing, and it's not difficult, but it's challenging because these people have different angles from which they see the same problems. We were able to manage the three communities and bring them together to give the audience an original take on the problem. This is part of the success of Bitter Winter, which has been quoted extensively by many medias and 54 times in the section on China in the latest report by the U.S. Department of State.
Sorry, there was a skip in the connection there. Can you start from where it was quoted multiple times?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we let me recap a little bit. Where were I was saying? Sorry. Yeah. Bitter Winter is an original combination of the three kind of people: the activists and advocates for human rights, religious studies scholars, and journalists. Sometimes it's not easy to bring all these people together, but we were successful in doing it, and this is part of the success which I think Bitter Winter has enjoyed, because we are able to bring to the audience different angles combined together, different takes on the same problems, and this is part of secret, so to speak, why we were quoted many times in many medias, and recently we were quoted. Bitter Winter was quoted 74 times in the section dealing on China of the most recent report on religious freedom by the U.S. State Department, which is pretty important and pretty relevant, and we were very proud of that. I, as you see, I repeat the word proud. We are proud of doing this, and I speaking frankly, it's not because of. I can say we are proud because it's not my merit. The merit goes to all the people we have on the ground in China, working undercover daily, every day, at the risk of their own lives to report the truth on China, and they do that on a voluntary basis. They do the best they can to smuggle out of the country information, original, truthful information, videos, pictures that sometimes you cannot see on other media. So again, when I say we're proud, the merit goes to these great people risking their lives. As a matter of fact, soon after we were launched in May 2018, within 6 months, 45 of our correspondents on the ground in China have been arrested. Because they were informing outside of the country. I mean, they were sending true information outside of the country. Half of them have been released soon after, and they told us that not all of them, but some of them have been tortured. So we know for sure what happens inside, but half of them disappeared in the void. We know nothing about them yet. I mentioned the video that we published from inside one of the detention camps in Xinjiang. As a matter of fact, when we published that video, the guy who shot it was already arrested. He or she has been already arrested. We didn't know that because it takes time for these things to come to us because of security reasons. So we published that, and soon after we knew that the author was in jail, and that guy disappeared. We know nothing about him or her. So this is the situation we're working with daily.
Yeah, that's tragic, and it just goes to show how important it is to get true information coming out of China and how difficult it is. And with the corona pandemic, we've seen that over and over again, and it's becoming more apparent to the world. Only now are we seeing the general public pay more attention, I think, to issues in China that affect the whole world. And um, why do you think it's so rare for the media to look at the issue of religious freedom in particular in China? I know, years back there's been issues about food safety and working conditions and stuff like that, but when it comes to religious persecution, there's really not been a lot of attention on it. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is a personal thought of mine because it's sometimes harder to document this kind of reflection. But first of all, I would say that religion as such is not a big deal for many media, because many media work under the impression that religion is nothing relevant. I mean, we are living in times in which the world thinks that secularization and even atheism is the dominant rule, and so they don't buy so much religious arguments. And so I mean they basically don't have the cast of mind to see the problems, so they don't realize it. So even if you show them the problem, they always say, no, it's not for religious reason. There should be something behind that: political reason, economic reason. I mean, this is a common cast of mind, especially in the West. This is, I think, it's an old. If we go to philosophy, it's an old positivistic attitude that is going on in a positivistic and scientistic cast of mind, in which religion doesn't count so much. So again, even if you show them the reality, they don't realize it. And this is the first reason, I think. Second is religion these days has been also so much. It's a very polarized argument. So if you're in favor of religion, it means that you have a moral stand on many things, and this moral stand on many things it doesn't go along with some political mainstream understanding of life. So don't touch religion. I personally know many editors in chief, many editors, many colleagues that they prefer not to touch on religion because it's a sensitive thing and it will disturb someone, so they don't go into that. Thirdly, dealing specifically with China, I think that China is so powerful a nation in the world that the economic and political ties that China has all over the world, in the West, especially in many countries of Europe, of course in many countries of Asia, and of course in many countries of Australia, down there, brings to it's a kind of self-imposed censorship on many colleagues that they don't want to disturb the red dragon because it can become dangerous. So they don't basically pay attention. I mean, basically they don't care about what happens in a huge country like China, about which many people cannot even locate cities. They don't know the culture. They don't know the language. They think that Chinese is one language. There are many languages within the country. There are many traditions, many peoples, many religions. They basically know nothing, or if they know about that, they ignore it because it's disturbing. So religion goes down the line, and religious people can go down the line, being persecuted in face of the silence of the world. And finally, I would add just very quickly that we documented that many journalists in the West are on the payroll of the CCP, yes. So they will never touch the topic. You can see many times Western media repeating the fake news, the lies of the CCP with no critical understanding of anything, and this is a very unprofessional way of doing by many of my colleagues, but it's a sad reality.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really important point, which is the marginalization of religion and faith in the modern life, and that's ironic because the very basis of history, is so deeply steeped in various religions, and most people subscribe to a value system or another,
Yes.
without whether you call it a formal religion or not, and that really strikes at the core of being human. So the implications of religious freedom is much greater than whether you can go to your church or your mosque. And I don't think a lot of people realize the extent, to which it's going to affect, human life if religious freedom is not protected. Can we talk a little bit now about what the faith landscape is like in modern China and what has been done to it over the last 20 or so years?
Yes, if I may just recap what you were saying, you're right. Religion is not a marginal point in the human landscape. This is why I consider myself blessed. It's a privilege to work on religious freedom every day, because I feel that I'm not working with some remote interest, but I'm right at the core of the important things. Going to your next question, the religious landscape in China is very articulated right now, for different reasons. Let me just start with a strong point. Religion is persecuted in China no matter what. The CCP doesn't make any theology, doesn't make any distinction. They persecute people with any kind of religious belief, whatever they call, whatever is the name that they give to God, whatever is the tradition they belong to. Again, as you correctly say, even just a set of moral values or beliefs, not maybe an organized religion, becomes an enemy for the CCP and is persecuted as such. And this because the CCP is still very proud these days to call itself communist. Communism comes from it's a strong ideology coming from Marxism, Leninism, and in China it has a Chinese flavor to that. And the CCP leaders are proud to call it communism or Marxism, Leninism with Chinese characteristic. One of the characteristics of all forms of communism, but specifically of Chinese communism, is to revive that all positivistic attitude that I already dealt with, meaning that they think that religion is an unnatural thing in human life, just like we believe that it's a natural thing, whatever it takes, whatever name it takes, or whatever form it takes. They just think of the opposite. Religion is something unnatural and foreign to human nature. So sooner or later it will die out. It's an evolutionary process. In the custom mind of the communists, it will die out sooner or later. But so they just say, let it be. It will die out. But they realize since the beginning that it didn't happen. People were still religious. Religions didn't die out, and and the opposite was true. They were growing. They are growing, and sometimes they fascinate people also within the CCP. So this religion, which is the enemy, it's an enemy since the start, because it's an alienation of the human mind in the CCP perspective, becomes an enemy even stronger because it doesn't die out. So it must be helped to die. This is why persecution, violent persecution, comes in. I mean, it's a twofold process. They are convinced that it will be extinct sooner or later, but in the meantime, they help this process to accelerate, and they do it as they can. Of course, I mean, the CCP, the communists, like to think that they are omnipotent, but they are not, of course. So they like to think that they can persecute everyone in the same way at the same time and get the extinction right away. But this is another thing that doesn't happen. So since the beginning, and when I say the beginning, I mean 1949, when the CCP took power with Mao Zedong in China, the regime managed the religious problem with again a twofold attitude. One is direct persecution, and another is trying to control religious group or churches from within. When the groups are not very powerful, they are not connected to organization abroad. They may be numerous, but they are not well known abroad. It is easier for the CCP to persecute them harshly and violently, and so get them to extinction with using violence. And this has happened many times during the Maoist time, and it's still happening in China today. When the groups are connected to organization abroad, they are starting becoming known abroad. It is not easy for the CCP to act in the same way. So what they do is trying to control them from within. As a matter of fact, since the 50s, the CCP established 5 great patriotic associations to try to control Protestantism, Catholicism, Buddhism, Islamism, and Taoism with patriotic association obeying to the CCP and trying to get the extinction, the natural extinction of unnatural religion from inside, from within. But sometimes this doesn't work. So they still need to go back to violent means. So these days, it happened during Maoist time, but it's happening again. It's stick and carrot. They sometimes hit very forcefully on groups, and sometimes they pull back and try to lure them into power, but in some sort of controlling of the faithful, of the believers. And this happens many times when the CCP doesn't have the material power to act directly in some region, in some context, in some times. When it can, the CCP acts violently, directly. When it cannot, it uses other tools. Let me point out that even patriotic association, meaning state-controlled religion, are persecuted these days. It's in a different way, but they are. We know that they for example, they say that the church controlled by the state cannot be that high because it disturbs some landscape, so it should be cut off, and they cut off the cross, for example. Or sometimes they say, to Buddhist or Islamic controlled groups that they cannot display religious symbols because some party leaders is supposed to come on that way, and that is not good. Or they close gathering venues for even for the state-controlled religions. Why I underline this? Because again, it is true that the CCP hates religion as such. It doesn't make any kind of theology. It persecutes all groups, religious groups alike. The differentiation is just in terms of the material possibility to act directly at that very moment. Right. So sometimes they need to pull back, waiting the right moment. But the attitude is always the same. um, religion is an enemy and it should be cancelled right away.
Yeah, so it goes straight to the nature of the Chinese Communist Party and its historical origins, actually. It, like you said, they've been trying to eradicate religion right from the beginning, and it's only escalated and become more sophisticated in its forms. Um, of course, I come from Friends of Falun Gong, and I want to talk a little bit about Falun Gong, which is has been like the hallmark, group that's been persecuted in China in recent times. How do you contextualize the 20-year-long persecution of Falun Gong in the grander scheme of religious freedom in China? What does it mean for the average person now?
Well, the persecution of Falun Gong, of course, responds to the hatred for religion that the CCP manages since the beginning. So Falun Gong it's a set of spiritual belief. So it's an enemy, and we could end here, but there is more to that. Falun Gong has been very successful in China. In the beginning, trying to hide or trying to misinterpret for their own sake the true nature of Falun Gong and perceiving it not as a also spiritual thing, but only as a physical training, so to speak, attitude or whatever. They kind of tried to live, to cope with that. As soon as this was not possible anymore, because the spiritual nature of Falun Gong becomes evident, and since Falun Gong was so successful and grew in numbers, the CCP perceived that as an enemy, as a danger, as it does every time religions start growing. Because growing of religion is the blatant contradiction of the prerequisites of materialistic communism. Again, for communism, for Chinese communism, religion is unnatural. So it will die out per se. But if it doesn't, and instead it grows, there is something which, it's the defeat of communism. Right. So they cannot allow it.
It disproves their entire basis.
Yeah, they cannot say, we were thinking that religion would die, but it doesn't. So, we were wrong. No, they cannot say we are wrong. So the very existence of groups like the Falun Gong is the defeat of the basic idea on which communism started and lives. So this is why religion is an enemy for the CCP, not because you're waging war against the communism, against the CCP of the Chinese government as such, but the other way around, because they perceive you and other groups, growing groups, successful groups, spiritual groups, as the denial of the premises of communism. And in my opinion, they're right, in the sense that you demonstrate that communism is a great lie, because it's based on a wrong perception of human nature, saying that spiritual things are alienation. So, but of course, I understand what the CCP does, but I side with you, not with that, of course. And this is why they are waging war. They have been waging war specifically on growing groups. And Falun Gong has enjoyed a very relevant growth in years, which scared the CCP. Again, on the religious landscape of religion in China, some sociologists have divided the religious landscape in three great areas. areas. They call them the gray market, the red market, and the black market of religion. The red market of religion is represented by those 5 patriotic associations I dealt with before, which are the way by which the CCP tries to infiltrate and control churches that they cannot smash right away. The gray market is made of those religions that the CCP would like to smash immediately, but doesn't have the power to do it. The black market is made of those religions that are, for many different reasons, are easier to smash by the CCP, and they are called Xiejiao. My Chinese is not very good, but Xiejiao is an old Chinese expression meaning an heterodox teaching. It was used in the old days for political reason. It has been resurrected by the CCP recently by the meaning of cults. Cults is a bad word, which which academics don't use because it doesn't mean anything. It's an insult that people use when they want to offend their opponent. So, but in the West, it has been used many times by media and political power to try to get some religious group out of the public square. So the CCP resurrected the Xiejiao heterodox teachings in the new meaning of Western like cults, and they applied these Xiejiao meaning cults to many groups, among which chiefly since 1995 Falun Gong. They made a list of these cults, and this belonging to these cults, just thinking of belonging to these cults, is a high crime in China, punished by Article 300 of the Penal Code, crime code, Chinese crime code, with years and years of prison in horrible condition. So this is the list of cults which are completely forbidden and particularly persecuted in China. Falun Gong and other groups, because of their growth, are listed in this list of Xiejiao. And for this reason, they belong, the Xiejiao are the black market, in which even thinking of belonging to one of these groups, it's a high crime, severely persecuted. And so this is why Falun Gong has been so targeted, because it was growing, because it was challenging the core belief of the CCP, and because it's one of the forbidden religion in China, because at some extent it is easier to crush them in comparison to other. Why? Because sometimes, I keep in mind examples like the Catholic Church or the mega Protestant Church. They have so many ties with people abroad, with governments abroad, with organizations abroad, that it becomes a little bit embarrassing for the CCP to crush them in the same way. When people don't, I remember all days in which when I spoke of Falun Gong in my country, people say, well, "What are you talking about?" Because no one or few people know about that. So it's easier for the CCP to work secretly in this way, and this is why Falun Gong, being a great enemy, being perceived as a great enemy, was easier to target and to crush.
Mm-hmm. And well, easy, but it's been 20 years and they still haven't done it. Falun Gong is alive and well in every part of the world, including China, underground, and
another defeat of the communist premise.
That's true. That's true, and the CCP has been weakening during the same time because people have seen through what it is. And I just want to kind of raise a question. It seems to me that what happened to Falun Gong, and what the CCP has been doing to kind of experiment on Falun Gong, they've then translated those experiences and applied them to other groups. At least that's what it looks like to me. It's like we were the Falun Gong were the testing ground of religious persecution in the modern age.
Yes, I do agree. I do agree. This is very well said. It's the big experiment to, since it worked at some extent. I mean, as you said, it didn't wipe out Falun Gong, but it took so many lives. So it's successful for the CCP at many extents. So they were able to apply the same thing to other groups. In fact, some of the techniques, the persecuting techniques that have been tried first on Falun Gong are being used right now in Xinjiang on Uyghurs or other groups, minority groups like the Church of the Almighty God, and sometimes on Tibetans and some Christians. They experimented it first on the Falun Gong. It worked. They realized it worked, so they're using it on other people. I'm thinking especially on human harvesting. The Falun Gong has been the designated victim, first designated victim of this horrible practice of human harvesting, targeting prisoner of conscience, and to transform them in industries to feed the black market of human organs transplants. The Falun Gong practitioner have paid a high toll to that, but that same technique is now, we know that is now used on other groups because it was successful again on Falun Gong. So they're transferring that to other groups. People sometimes, I mean, some ingenious journalists that come to some truth on persecution of religion in China sometimes say they are surprised by the huge high-tech technology surveillance system that it's going on in many parts of the country, like Xinjiang, Tibet, and this and that. And sometimes they encounter also DNA profiling of people in Xinjiang, and they wonder why they are profiling through DNA people. You know, if you connect the dots, what they did with human harvesting, so it's a medical thing, biological thing. You need some biological analysis before that, some medical analysis. They did it successfully on Falun Gong, and you wonder why they are DNA profiling people in other regions, other groups, other ethnic or religious groups. Again, connect the dots. So you're totally right. It was the grand opening to some extent of modern persecution in China, and I think all over the world, because it's not a Chinese problem. It's not only a Chinese problem, the persecution of Falun Gong, and from that they were able to export the experience, so to speak, to other groups and religion. This is why, let me tell you, not because I'm speaking to friends of Falun Gong, I'm not a Falun Gong practitioner, but I feel very sorry, and I feel I feel I need to do something for you people of Falun Gong, because you are scapegoats. You have been sacrificial victims on these horrible altars of ideology, and you have served as the test, the great test for persecuting also others. So you opened a way, and you paid so high a price that people cannot stay silent. It's something similar, even if different for many reasons. When we speak about the Holocaust of the Jews, people must react. The Holocaust of everyone. I underline that, but specifically people like Falun Gong, because of what they suffered, should get people to react, to be outraged, and go out in the street and do something.
Yeah, thank you for that. And a couple minutes ago, you said that this is not solely a Chinese problem. Can you expand on that thought a little?
Well, religious persecution is not just a Chinese problem. It doesn't happen only in China. I think China is the great firm of modern religious persecution. But I think that I will not go into details because Bitter Winter, as a director in charge of Bitter Winter, I need to stay only on China. I have my ideas and off records. I can share them with you, or when I work as a journalist, not writing on Bitter Winter, I'm free to comment on other situation. But to not to avoid your question, I think that what is tried in China serves at least as a model for many other countries who take religions in contempt, who have religions in contempt, and sometimes not only that, but they positively persecute groups. Maybe not at the same time, not on the same scale, but again, China is something that works at that respect. So it's copied by many, at least as a cast of mind. This is what I can say as a director in charge of a magazine on China, on things that are not Chinese.
Yeah, what I've been seeing lately is the surveillance that they've been using, the technology that they, probably they started using it to monitor Falun Gong, and now it's monitoring everybody who is suspected of anything, or maybe even has a cough or something because of the coronavirus.
Yes, you're right. This is I'm very skeptical of applets on smartphones or tablets that come into the West also, or other surveillance systems that they are supposed to fight viruses, but instead they may be used for other ends.
Mm-hmm. So let's wrap up with my last question, which I hope you can answer. So this administration in the U.S., the Trump administration, has been paying particular interest in the issue of religious freedom around the world. And this is something that's really new, at least in my lifetime. I've never seen the White House been so interested in this issue. What do you think the outlook is for religious freedom, especially in China, since that's your area?
I hope the best will come out of this special interest. Let me add that you're right. It's an unprecedented. At some extent, it's an unprecedented action from the U.S. and the White House. But keep in mind that the USA, the United States, are based since the beginning on religious freedom. It was made of people escaping religious persecution from Europe. So they went there and they tried to establish a new land. But more than that, if you look at the American Constitution, the First Amendment of the American Constitution is the right to religious freedom and to live according to your freedom. So it is not just your personal freedom, as an individual. It's also the freedom to work, to live according to your faith. This is the first political right of every American citizen enshrined in the U.S. Constitution, and it's the basis of all the constitutional law in the U.S. So there is something there that is working since the beginning toward this end. But you're right. Again, this is, at some extent, this interest is kind of unprecedented. I think that one of the reasons, it may not be the only one, but one of the reasons is the scale of religious persecution that is going on these days. I mean, come on, we're living in the year 2020. We're not living, 500 years ago, and we still have people burning at stakes, people for different religions. I mean, I'm using this image, burning at stakes, but it's not very far from reality. They are torturing people in the year 2020 on a large scale because they belong to a different ethnicity, and they belong to a religion. I mean, after the Holocaust of the Jews decades ago, we're still there. And after people have, I mean, we are so proud of speaking about world peace, equality, freedom for all. There is no discrimination, and we still have a country of 1,400,000,000 people persecuting, and not all of them, but the government, of course. I mean, this huge country still doing these barbaric things to people. I think this gets people mad. And the political reaction in a country like the US, which is not paradise, which has a lot of problems, but which at least have this idea of religious freedom as the first political right of every human being enshrined, the most sacred law of the land, gives us some result. I mean, it gets to this reaction. This is why I hope that good things will come out of this new interest. I do hope, let me repeat it, that other interests will not lower the interests of the U.S. Toward religious freedom. You know that politicians may be sensible to different things. We know that money play a lot of role. I mean commercial ties. I hope that the USA will keep on doing what they are doing for the sake of religious liberty, and even more.
Thank you for the history lesson. I'm sure a lot of Americans need to hear it. Yes, that's right.
I didn't mean to give any lesson. But
no, really. I'm serious. Like in schools, I don't think they teach that aspect, the fact that America is founded on religious liberty, the Puritans.
Well, I wrote a few things on that.
Yeah. And I'll be glad to share those articles. I think it's going to be very helpful for people's broader understanding. So speaking of the average citizen, what do you suggest that people do to educate themselves more about this? And what can anybody really do in their individual lives to promote religious freedom? I know it's a very big topic and we're all just like tiny people, but your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, it's a big topic, but it's also an easy one to answer to some extent. I mean, we were living in the age of internet. We have tons of reliable sources on the internet for free to be informed. I mean, Peter Winter is out there. You, friends of Falun Gong, are out there. There are plenty of. I can make a full list of daily newspaper or think tanks or website who do a professional job in informing. So it's quite easy and costs nothing to use your smartphone and say, wait a minute, what the CCP is saying is a lie. I mean, you can confront easily. If I say a lie now, tomorrow, not tomorrow, in 2 seconds, I mean, people will debunk me easily. So this can be done today by everyone on their smartphone. Of course, it's a jungle also. Internet is a jungle, so you need some guidance. Well, we have some guidance. It's easy to understand when someone is reliable or not, because reality speaks for the truth. We have been found reliable. We have been winter by many. Why? For example, we receive so many news, much more news than we publish, and sometimes it takes days for us to publish a piece of news. Why? Because we verify that. Because if I by mistakes, in good faith, I publish fake news, the CCP will be after me immediately. The CCP tried to attack us many times. We have been hacked. Our server has been burned. We have been hacked many times. 45 of our reporters have been arrested, but never the CCP has been able to say that we were speaking, we were lying. So it's easy also to verify who is good or not, who's reliable or not. So everyone should do this every day and confront what they hear from the CCP or their advocates or some Western journalists and find out the truth. And once they have found out the truth, they should have the moral duty to pass it on to their friends. It's human and normal. If I go to the seaside or the mountainside with my kids or my wife, when I see a beautiful landscape, what I do, what you do, you call your friends, say, look, this is so beautiful, look at that. So if you see a piece of news which is truthful and reliable on the CCP, on the religious persecution, you should call your friends and say, look at this. Have you heard this? Have you read this? You didn't, so read it. And when you have read it, pass it on yourself. This is the least we can do. And I'm speaking we should create a kind of moral majority in the normal people before going to professional. Mm-hmm. In the normal people that can change the average view on these problems. Politicians and media will start looking at these things carefully only when average people, will press upon them. This is the way democracy works. When people are able, when people can lobby on a subject, politicians and media will start taking care of that. So this is something easy that people. It's a huge topic, as you said, but it's something that we can do normally. I'm afraid that many times people don't want to pay attention to these things because they are disturbing. Sometimes they don't have time. They won't be disturbed. But again, is it worth living? Is life worth living in a merely materialistic and hedonistic terms? Should I go on not caring for what is happening around me? And being satisfied with my small little life when I know that some guys aside of me are persecuted in this way. I think no. I think this is not natural for the human beings. But sometimes human beings these days don't recall this truthful human nature. Mm-hmm. We should try to awake them, and it's not. There is a level in which you can do this through organization and a magazine like but we can start doing it on a personal basis every day. I taught my kids to speak for the truth every time they hear a lie. And in schools, when they say, the CCP is helping Italy during the coronavirus. Yes, but my father is working every day, and he tells me that, they persecute people. Look at this video, look at this picture. This is simple. Everyone can do it.